My name is Joanne, and I will welcome you to the One to Another podcast. Today, we're going to talk about a subject that very few people ever want to talk about, and we're going to talk about suicide. And we are moving into the holiday season, and there's many people who are hopeless. But I've invited someone special to come in today who has walked through hopelessness to hope. And I want you to hear her story because I think her story has great impact, and I believe it's going to help anyone who has had a suicide and needs some help. So thank you for tuning in today. I think it's going to be meaningful for you. So welcome, Diane. Glad
Hello.
You're here.
Hi.
So tell me a little bit about your family.
I have 3 children. My son is 42 and my daughter is 29. They're both married. My son has 4 kids. That's my grandchildren. And then I had my son Tyson, who would have been 44.
And so what was it like for them when they were growing up? What was Tyson like?
Tyson was a normal boy. He and his brother, so they were almost 2 years apart, and they bombed around with each other. A normal kid, went to school and did sports and just was a normal kid. And then as time went on, I guess, so they were in Boy Scouts together. They played baseball together. But then somewhere when he was finishing up middle school, one by one, he quit doing activities. He quit Boy Scouts. He quit baseball. In junior high, he went to class, but then wouldn't do some of the work. So he was having inconsistent grades. In high school, the same thing. So then he was in high school and was failing, I went to the teachers and was constantly figuring out, well, what does he need to get done? Where is he failing? And constantly trying to come up with ways to get him to go to school. Anything from, we'll buy you a car. We were trying all this stuff to reward him. And then we would try, well, now you're grounded. Now you can't have your stereo in your room. And nothing worked to get him to go to school. And to come home some nights. He would stay at his friends' night after night and have dinner with his family. And so I then took him to a counselor, and teachers weren't much help. The counselor, he wouldn't talk. Boys don't talk. This is my firstborn. I didn't, I was just like, well, I guess that counseling isn't working. And so time went by, and I ended up taking him to a different counselor. I took him to a counselor because now he had gone from not going to school now and then to not going to school at all and staying in his room. And when he would come out, he would come into the room, stop, stand there, and then turn around and go walk somewhere else. And he was lost. So I took him to a counselor, and the counselor said, of course, he wasn't talking much. And so the counselor says, well, he's either belligerent or on drugs. And he sent us home. And so we went home, and again, this is a kid that hasn't been anywhere for months. And the counselor was saying, well, he must have a stash. So we didn't know what to do except keep going on like that. Well, at that time, I was working part-time, and the tax time was coming, and I was going to work full-time. So my brother was working out of his house, so I sent him to his house. While he was there, things got definitely worse. He was starting fires, and I guess what made my brother finally tell me about these things is he left. It was winter, and he went outside without a jacket, just tennis shoes, and was gone for a half an hour, and came back in, and they came back, thankfully, and it had didn't know where he was, didn't know why. And so my brother had said he needs to go to a hospital.
Wow.
So we took him to St. Vincent's, and that's where, so if you think back, we've been dealing with this progression for a couple of years, and finally got a diagnosis that he had schizophrenia. The other S word to suicide.
Wow. So, Diane, what was going on inside of you when this was going on? Were you just so...
I was at wit's end because I kept trying this.
Yeah, I imagine
and
you
not
were.
able. Nothing's working. Nothing. And I was, again, he's my firstborn, so I was sort of naive. I wasn't getting information. I didn't, schizophrenia. What's that?
Right.
And the psychiatrist sat us down at the hospital and explained this to us, and they just looked at us and said, "You don't understand that this isn't just from he had a psychotic break, obviously, if he was doing these crazy things, and it didn't start there. It started with him feeling depressed for a long period of time, and he was reaching out to street drugs to self-medicate."
Oh, so he was getting some drugs.
Yeah, I don't think at the time. I think he was so debilitated at the time when he was spending time in our house and looking lost. I think he was already psychotic and lost.
I think you're right.
I need to step back a bit because there was an incident that happened right before he was acting lost. He got a new friend, and the friend wanted to take him to OMSI to go to that the laser show.
Oh.
And this new friend was so wanting, this will be great. We never let him go anywhere like that. They'd have to take the bus or whatever they were going to do. And this friend was just, this will be fine. It'll be fine. Well, I found out later that this friend then went and showed my other son, Tim, and the circle of friends, look at what we're going to take while we're there. And it was a bunch of, I think, LSD or something, and acid. And he says, "We're going to go do this." And so what we had, the psychiatrist at the hospital said that he had a drug-induced psychotic break. They explained that happens. Some people can do drugs and that won't happen, but others, it will. It's like playing Russian roulette.
By that time, you must have been very, very anxious.
Yeah. So our insurance stopped. He could only be there for 2 weeks. They recommended that he go to the state hospital, that he was not lucid enough to be anywhere. He needed to get on drugs for antipsychotics and get where he knew that there's no real voices in the room, There's no one talking to him from the TV and that kind of thing. So in order to get it into the state hospital, we had to go to a Clackamas County meeting where people from the state hospital, the St. Vincent Hospital, Clackamas County Mental Health was there, and I, as a parent, had to go there.
And how old was he then?
He was 15.
15, wow.
Sorry, 16. So I had to go to this building, and I'm nervous just talking about it because I had to go into this panel of people and agree that my son be sent to St. Vincent. I'm already grieving because, where is my son? So I went through the door, and the director was there, and he took one look at me. I was crying, and he says, "Look, maybe you can just go in the bathroom and, just take a breather, and then we'll go into that room." And I was like, okay. Went into the bathroom wondering, well, I don't know how this is going to help me. I still, I was a mess. And all of a sudden, I don't know where this lady came from, if she came out of the stall or what, but she was holding a Bible, and she just kept saying, "Jesus is with you." Wow. And she just kept praising Jesus and saying, "You can do whatever you have to do. Jesus is with you." She didn't even ask me, "Why are you crying?" She just was proclaiming Jesus. And I just was like, I feel like she was an angel, because I was like, okay, totally innocent, just innocent babe, like, okay. And so I went, well, I got to wash my face. And as I washed my face, she was gone. So
I bet that was an angel.
Because usually people, maybe they'll hug you, they'll make sure you're okay. She was gone. And I went in there and did what I had to do to get him there. And so he was in the state hospital, a terrible place for adolescents to go.
How long was he there?
He was there about 6 months.
Wow.
And then we had the choice of go to a group home or go home and go to day treatment center during the day and go to school in Oregon City. And of course, I wanted him to come home. We all wanted him home. We've been praying, and he was being able to be released, and he could remember what meal he had in the morning, and we're going to get this done. And so he came home. He was at that day treatment center. 6 months later, about 6 months, I went to work, and then I came home, and he wasn't there. And I was like, well, where's Tyson? Tim was on the couch with Katie. Apparently, he didn't go to school. I was not called. But, they have things in place now. I was not notified he had not gone to school. I found him in my room. He had killed himself.
Oh, Diane.
So I came. The police came, the ambulance came, and then our pastor came. My pastor said, God doesn't flick people off the fence to see who's going to get back up. In other words, God didn't cause this. I still remember this to this day, what he said. It was like maybe the start of healing, I guess, so to speak, I guess, my beginnings. Then I went through what anyone goes through, whirling of emotions. Wailing was new to me. Thoughts, tears at any time. And my son, his younger brother, and my husband thought I was losing my mind because I would just come into our room and just start bawling. And so I went to a grief counselor, and he said, well, guess what? You're completely normal. You're not losing your mind. You're grieving.
Yes.
And so I went home and says, well, you guys don't have to worry about me, and these tears are just going to come, and I'm going to be acting lost, and this is how it is. I'm probably already speaking how guys do things different than women or something. So then I was crawling, I felt like I was basically crawling. And then I began to feel like two people. And people speak of feeling numb. And I don't know if that's what numb is, but for a long time, I felt like two people. There was one broken person, and the other person, the functioning person, taking the broken person along. So I had my 3-year-old daughter to care for. I had work. I had family. And so the functioning me kept going, but the other part was just hurting.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Because somehow you have to cope.
Yeah, it was.
And so it was your coping skill at that moment that you were two different people. And I think it's amazing that you could recognize that.
Yeah. Some days I felt I couldn't go on, and then suddenly it would just lift. And I'd be going, are people praying for me right now? Why? I would just breathe and feel okay. And that's just like the waves of grief. You're just I was in a huge valley. I found that people are afraid of suicide. They're afraid of schizophrenia. I couldn't talk about it to people. That just frightened them. Or if they could talk about it, they would shirk, like it could happen to them, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So
they don't know what to say. So usually they don't say anything.
And to lose a child is
terrible.
And there's lots that can be said about people's reactions. But I reached out to different groups. I found a suicide bereavement support group, and I learned to ask why and to cry until I didn't need to anymore. The suicide bereavement group, I found a safe place to talk through the horrific details of suicide and other people's stories, the methods, how they found them, notes or no notes, things they tried to do, things they didn't do. And I found that people felt isolated because, we're in this club, I guess, where it's just suicide is so frightening. And it's so misunderstood that suicide are dying from mental illness just like physical health. And it's really hard for people to grasp that. I learned in that group how to navigate through what people say. I also learned that all these things that I didn't do, well, he was suicidal, so why didn't I know about depression? Well, honestly, I've heard how people kept their houses safe, removed knives, pills, whatever. And it never occurred to us about suicide. But then in this group, people had done those things. They had kept things safe. They had made sure their loved one was never alone, and things, they would die anyway. And I learned that, even though I didn't do some of these things, people die anyway. And was a huge thing to realize, that, it released the grief, that part of it. I also found compassionate friends, and that's parents of children who've had parents die or children die. And then they would have a different breakout group for parents of suicide children. But neither group would say that God exists. If you believe in that, then that's okay for you, but it may not be okay for someone else in the groups. So therefore, God was not spoken.
Was that hard for you?
Yeah, that was a big piece that was missing. Because,
you had been
thankfully, I was a Christian before all this and had those building blocks to lean on, and prayer. And so in my walk, my journey, there was support groups, books, and my faith and prayer and reading the Bible. And I found that I needed a different group because I wasn't getting the take on it. And that's when I don't know how I found grief release, but I found it. And that's where it came together. That's where more work was able to keep going, because, now I had done mechanics with suicide, mechanics, so to speak. I hate to call it mechanics, but the nuts and bolts, and then being a parent that's lost a child, and now, listen to what God has to say about grief. And I held on to things like, well, it's obvious, blessed are they that mourn, for God shall comfort them. So simple. There's the answer in simple words, and I would just hang on those things. I learned to be with the pain instead of fighting it. I let myself feel it. You just turning and looking at things and feeling it. I ended up making an if only list. I don't know where I got the idea, but I put on that list from if only his friends came around after he was sick, if only I was home, if only the teachers were, the list, I went the gamut for what before, and if only all these things could have been in place for him to make a safety net that would keep him. But some people fall through the holes. I learned that I couldn't point to one specific thing. And so I was blessed that I didn't hold on to guilt. I didn't hold on to blame. I couldn't.
Good for you.
So, and that's the only way you can walk out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Is you just have to let go.
I think
that, and instead of asking why me, and like we all, when things happen, why me? I was going, well, why not me? Why am I any different than anyone else? And time, visiting those things. And then I learned to just trust God that obviously I don't have and won't know all the answers.
Aren't you glad?
Yes. But I spent I'm kind of an analytical person, and I had to ask why. I had to look at everything about it over and over again. And you just have to keep thinking about it repeating it, crying, being with the pain till you can just go, okay, I don't have all the answers, and I'm going to put it in God's hands and go forward.
During this time, did you get much help from your husband?
I was going to kind of leave him for last.
Okay.
I did list that my work was grief groups, books, prayer, journaling, and friends. I found early on how my son and my husband thought I was crazy. And although he listened to me talk, he wasn't, there just weren't words. There wasn't much comfort. He had his own thing. He's still kind of riddled with guilt. We were too close. Same with my son. I was too close. We were too close. All of us had our own huge pain. And my daughter, well, she was just little, and that's a whole nother subject. He wasn't the help I needed. I got it from all those other things. I worked those things, and I had friends that cared. I had one friend that she'd cry with me.
Oh, what a gift.
We still can. And so I knew that's another thing about the blame and guilt. I didn't blame him for anything. I also didn't hold him. I didn't hold it against him that he couldn't help me. And that's key. There's a high divorce rate among.
There is.
And that's key. I reminded him today. I says, this is what I'm going to tell him about you. It's okay. Even now, it's just, and same with my own self-guilt. Maybe I just had this thing like, okay, you can think those things, but you can't stay there. Maybe it was God, like, nope, just taking me. But I was blessed where I was able to not stick where those things, I knew they weren't helping, and they didn't make sense cognitively to me. Mm-hmm. So I read a book called My Son from Iris Bolton, and there was a poem she put it on a little card that was an insert in the book, and I have that little card on my wall in my bedroom, and the poem says, I don't know why, I'll never know why, I don't have to know why, I don't like it, I don't have to like it. What I do have to do is make a choice about my living. What I do want to do is accept it and go on living. The choice is mine. I can go on living, valuing every moment in a way I never did before, or I can be destroyed by it and in turn destroy others. I thought I was immortal, that my family and my children were also. That tragedy happened only to others. But I know now that life is tenuous and valuable. So I am choosing to go on living, making the most of the time I have, valuing my family and friends in a way never possible before.
Well, you've had an incredible journey, and where you are today, what would you say to someone who's experiencing a suicide right now or has experienced one in the last year? What would you say would be something that you would give them as wisdom?
It is so fresh in the first year. I had to just be with my thoughts, be with my feelings, take one day at a time, be gentle. If I couldn't do anything, I couldn't do anything. Just take it easy. For holidays, we just did things different.
And that helps.
And I still practice that. Sometimes we do holidays if they work, and if they don't, they don't.
That's good.
And they don't have to be what the traditional is. I think the main thing is being with the people you need to be with and see what happens.
And be honest.
Yeah. Yes.
And be really transparent with those that you can be with.
Yes. I'm being reminded of how it almost feels like, it's really dodgy. I guess I was really dodgy. I would be careful who I was with and what I would say and how long I would stay.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And
that's
it's
true.
all okay. I sound like a poet, but that's what it is. And it's okay that it's dodgy. It's okay, and that hurts too.
Well, Diane, thank you for sharing your story. It's an incredible story. I have known you for a long time, and I've seen you grow, and I've seen you now be in a place where you can talk about it and you can give hope to other people. Sometimes that's what it's about, is in the reflection that you can say, I've been there and I understand. And maybe that someone comes into your life now that you can help. And that's a great gift. So thank you for being here today. So I really want to encourage everybody who's listening today, if there's something, one step that you can take wherever you are in your life, this is the time just to take that one step. So thank you for listening.